good old days.
It was an entirely different world.
It was not as busy as it is today.
It was terrific. It was like a nice little community town.
We were close-knit, and we knew everybody.
It was 19,000 permanent residents and 250,000 in the winter.
In October, the season started, and then it was a busy little city.
Oceanfront property you could buy for $5,000 a lot. Oceanfront.
I practiced general medicine. We charged $5 for an office visit, $10 for a house call.
We never locked our doors. My father left the keys in the car.
It was innocent. There was no concern and no fear of anything or anybody in this magic city.
We hitchhiked. My parents used to have a cabana in different hotels every summer. We were dropped off at 10 in the morning with $2 and picked up at 5 in the afternoon. Spent the whole day there without a worry.
The schools were fabulous.
At Beach High, everybody sought to make a good career and have good grades.
It was like going to the most elite private school. We just had brilliant, brilliant kids.
Miami Beach was Candyland.
We lived in a very glamorous period. Even when you got on an airplane, you wore a suit and high heels and stockings. That was before pantyhose.
We used to have more cold weather than we have now. So then they used to walk up and down the street with their mink stoles on. Lincoln Road was mostly shoe stores. People used to come with empty suitcases when they came down in the winter to buy shoes here.
We would take the bus to Lincoln Road, and there were 5 movie theaters there in those days. There was the Carib, there was the Beach, the Flamingo, the Lincoln, which at that time was a movie theater, and the Colony.
But the most glamorous was the Carib. You walked into a jungle-like lobby with all the parrots tweaking around.
Saturday afternoons, you saw everyone you knew.
The hotels were always exciting places to go.
There were teenage rooms with jukeboxes. Later, when we got older and we started driving, we were cruising up and down in my mother's convertible. Everyone chip in a quarter and I'd fill up the gas tank.
We did very simple things in those days. We'd go to Wolfie's on Lincoln Road, or we'd go to Wolfie's 21 on Sunday mornings. All the kids were there for breakfast. Later, we would go to Pumpernicks.
We had gambling, and we had horse racing.
Miami Beach was a haven for many movie stars and socialites.
We were exposed to every kind of celebrity who came and performed in the nightclubs and in the hotel lounges. I saw Frank Sinatra and I saw Sophie Tucker and others who performed at the Beachcomber.
My husband was always having someone take pictures of me with the celebrities. Jimmy Durante and Danny Kaye, Liberace.
I'm very, very happy to be making my first appearance in a Miami Beach hotel.
My brother-in-law was Jack Gordon. He was the senator for the state of Florida. He and I built a motel on Venetian Causeway. The connection we had with the State Department brought us all the celebrities that could come to stay at our motel. One of them was the Tin Man from The Wizard of Oz.
Miami Beach was an armed encampment at that time. Approximately 2/3 of the Army Air Corps took their basic training in Miami Beach.
The city belonged to the soldiers. They were welcomed and housed.
All the buildings that my dad had owned got taken away by the military. They took over the apartment houses, the hotel over on the ocean.
The soldiers would march up and down the street carrying, instead of rifles, broomsticks. And I would occasionally get dressed up in a Cub Scout uniform and salute them.
I was about 15 going to school, and the soldiers would turn and they would look and they say, the girl on the right is a bit of a right, parlez-vous. The girl on the right is a bit of a right, I wonder what she's doing tonight. Inky dinky parlez-vous.
I was too young to date soldiers, but my sister was 3.5 years older, so it was very interesting.
There were 90,000 men stationed here, but out of the 90,000, I pointed my finger and I said, I'll take that one.
The German submarines were off the coast here, and they were sinking ships that were transporting equipment overseas.
You would see cargo floating into the beach from a torpedoed ship. And there were barracks across the street where the Bal Harbor Shops is today.
It was a prisoner of war camp for German and Italian prisoners of war.
At night, there were air raids.
You had blackout curtains on the windows for security purposes.
My Henry went to the U.S. Army. We wrote every day. There were millions of letters going back and forth. So the government decided the bulk was too much, and they shrank the letters down to a little square.
I was a captain in the Army, served in France, and there were 36 men in our outfit. I moved to Miami Beach in 1946 because during the war, my wife's family lived there.
My husband joined the Army. He ended up being a paratrooper and a glider. He ended up coming in on a glider and jumping out of airplanes. And he was in the Battle of the Bulge. He went through some of the concentration camps. He must have seen a lot of horrific stuff, but he came home.
Many of those young men who trained in Miami Beach during the war later relocated and moved to Miami Beach permanently. And it's hard for people today to relate back to that time when there was a lot of anti-Semitism on Miami Beach. Many places were restricted. There was a broken-down hotel called the Marine Terrace, which had a sign, every view, but not a Jew.
There were signs up back then at Lagos Country Club, no Jews allowed. I remember going home one day from school, and I was so excited. It was Halloween. I said to my mother, Mommy, Mommy, I'm going to a Halloween party tonight. She said, where? I said, Lagos Country Club. She said, no, you're not going. And I started crying. I couldn't understand why I couldn't go.
All the Jewish population was below 5th Street. And above and beyond 41st Street, no Jews were allowed.
In 1945, my father bought a 250-acre swamp, which is today the town of Bay Harbor Islands. He says, to the south is the village of Indian Creek, restricted. To the east is Bal Harbor, restricted. So he says, how can I miss? Any Jew who wants to be in that area, and someday there'll be lots that will want to be there, have only one choice, and that's Bay Harbor Islands.
1958, we moved to Bay Harbor Island, and then immediately, that's the same year, we joined the Temple.
After World War II, the Jewish population really took off in Miami Beach.
A lot of the northeastern Jewish people came to Florida for health reasons.
I moved to Miami Beach because it was probably the in thing to do in the late 40s.
I think a lot of New Yorkers at the time immigrated, so to speak, to the southern Negev, to Miami Beach.
Jews were a distinct minority in Miami Beach. After the end of World War II, they started to become a majority. So by the time I graduated Miami Beach High School in 1952, the majority of my classmates were Jewish. Now I'm living long enough to see where Miami Beach now only has 22% of its population is Jewish. So what goes around comes around.
My father, with the people in the area, they got together and they formed what was a little minion group over on Arthur Godfrey Road. The group he was with were the beginning of Beth Sholom.
At that time, they had a storefront for Temple. It was sort of borrowed or rented space.
In Miss Galen's dance studio, and there probably were about 50 people.
Temple Beth Sholom. Next, graduated to an apartment house on Chase Avenue, which was renovated to be a synagogue with classrooms upstairs.
Temple Beth Sholom was a very quiet, inconspicuous building.
There was no air conditioning. And so my husband, who was an attorney at that time, represented Copus City, which was a tremendous nightclub. And he had Murray Ranga, who was the owner, take the air conditioner unit out of the nightclub, installed it in the temple for a high holiday service. After the service, they took it out, reinstalled it into the nightclub, and it went on.
I was one of the first members. As a matter of fact, I was a secretary to a gentleman named Charles Tobin, and he brought Rabbi Kronish.
Rabbi Kronish went from door to door to get members, and that's how Temple Beth Sholom grew.
I met Lillian and Leon Kronish, Rabbi Kronish, when I first came here. They were the most embracing people to newcomers in this community.
We had the rabbi over to pool parties and house parties, and he and his wife Lillian came, and we were very welcomed into their arms, and vice versa.
Rabbi Kronish was always interested in the welfare of his congregation and in the welfare of the temple. He lived Temple Beth Sholom.
A liberal Jewish synagogue he wanted to build.
Rabbi Kronish was a major force in our community, in our synagogue, and I think around the world.
He was a very civic-minded person. He was a very open-minded person.
What set him apart was that he was so much of the times.
Rabbi Kronish's sermons were something of current events. They were announced the week in advance. We used to get a temple bulletin.
Abraham took a stand against dehumanization.
Speaker like you've never heard before. But he would also concentrate on your personal values. And he would end so many sermons. The most important thing in life is to be a mensch. Brings tears to my eyes to remember Rabbi Kronish and those ceremonies.
Rosh Hashanah brings us together to take stock and to celebrate the birth of our world and the creation of the first man. The all-pervasive prayer of our liturgy is the Book of Life. We reaffirm the possibility of rewriting another page, the possibility of renewal, repentance. We celebrate life.
Rabbi Kronish was like bigger than life.
After the sermon, he always spread his arms out and said a prayer for the congregation.
In those black robes, it looked like God came down to bless us all.
We were in awe of Rabbi Kronish.
It was naturally in September and hurricane warnings, but my family and I were in the synagogue, and all of a sudden the power went off in the sanctuary, and we were in darkness. And then Rabbi Kronish stood up and made some kind of a statement, and miraculously, the lights came back on.
Rabbi Kronish was recruiting religious school students. He came over to the playground of North Beach Elementary School and asked the physical education teacher to point out any Jewish children. The physical ed teacher pointed out 2 children on the playground, my brother and me. The rabbi came over and introduced himself and explained that he was recently appointed the rabbi of this temple, and he would like very much for my brother and myself to think of attending the religious school.
I was the first bar mitzvah in that temple building.
Arnie was the second boy bar mitzvah at Beth Sholom, and he was in the first confirmation class.
I met wonderful people in my confirmation class, of which I'm still friends with many of them to this day.
I went to Hebrew school and Sunday school here when I was a kid, but I was not the Temple's finest product. I used to always skip to go to the drugstore on the corner, and God bless Rabbi Cronish used to come chase me down every week. Isabel, back in class. I said, oh, come on, Rabbi, I don't want to. Back in class.
Boys in that period of time usually dropped out of confirmation class. Every week after I dropped out of confirmation class, he would write my parents a letter or a postcard or call me. Michael, come back to be confirmed. My senior year in high school, he took two very close friends of mine, Jimmy Roth, who since passed away, Robert Rubin, who became the Secretary-Treasurer of the United States, asked us to come in one day a week at 6 o'clock and have an open-ended discussion with him. And it would culminate by that June. He would confirm, as seniors in high school, the three of us.
I don't think we took it too seriously at that time, but we all stayed to be part of Beth Sholom as we grew older and got married and raised our children. They all became part of Beth Sholom.
It was like coming home every time I walked into the temple.
There's a family here in this temple. There's always somebody you can call.
The temple has provided us with a very nice social environment.
It was more than just our temple, it was part of our life. And after services, the whole group of us went to Junior's for a snack. Even the rabbi would sometimes come and join us.
Rabbi Cronish introduced the idea of the Havarah. The congregation needed to be closer. You needed to know people within it, not just when you come to services.
We had wonderful parties here.
The activities, the feeling of belonging.
The Sunday Brotherhood breakfast, where they would have speakers like Larry King, who went a long way since then.
Beth Sholom had wonderful Sisterhood programs.
My wife became president. The Sisterhood became a very active and enjoyable place for members to come and participate.
There was a thespian group, and I was part of it. It was a lot of fun because you really got to know people better that way.
When my grandchildren were young, they were in the children's choir.
The temple has done wonderful things in the community.
Beth Sholom does encourage how easy it is to volunteer.
I was very lucky to have Dr. Saul Lichter as one of my teachers in Hebrew school when I was here, so I've known him since I was a kid. And when they wanted to start a feeding program here, he called me and asked me to be his partner in it. For about 10 years, he and I would take the van, the rickety old van, and pick up the food on Fridays. On Saturdays, we'd have a committee here to make the food that we give out on Sunday mornings. Every Sunday morning for about 10 years, we were on the street in Miami Beach, wherever we didn't get kicked out of, giving away food to hundreds of people. So then we moved to the Chapman House, and we feed people there, still ongoing, once a month.
Miami has always been connected to Israel.
My father was very active as a Zionist, as was Rabbi Cronish.
As head of the Miami Beach Zionist District, my father became acquainted with other Zionist leaders in the United States. In 1945, he was invited to New York for a very special meeting.
David Ben-Gurion snuck in from Canada to attend the meeting.
He said, "World opinion is with the Jewish people now for the catastrophe we have suffered. We must establish the state. And the way we do it is we get the British to give up the mandate of Palestine. How do we do that? We take ships and pick up the displaced refugees from Southern Europe, France and Italy, and we run the blockade. England will not be able to take the displaced persons and send them back to their homes in Europe. Most of you are from seaport towns. You have to get us boats."
It was highly secretive. It was dangerous because there was an arms embargo to the settlers in Palestine at that time. And if you were caught, it was jail time.
My father outfitted 3 surplus boats on the Miami River, part of the 10 of the Secret Fleet, which forced England to throw the problem of Palestine into the United Nations. And the United Nations came up with the partition plan.
My family were all here at Temple Beth Sholom in 1948 when Israel became a state. And it was a huge, huge celebration.
Rabbi Kronish took on himself to be one of the founders of the Israel bonds that people would get investments in Israel. And I got active in that after I got out of the Navy. And in a few years, I was made chairman of Israel bonds for entire South Florida. We had some wonderful fairs, raised a lot of money for Israel and Israel bonds. One of the finest fairs we had is when someone knew Kirk Douglas well and called Kirk Douglas and said to him, and I was in the room, Kirk, do you believe in free speech? He says, what kind of nonsense is that? Of course I believe in free speech. And they said, well, come down to Miami Beach and make one for us. So we got him down and we did an affair at Vizcaya.
Rabbi Kronish would invite guest speakers for the Friday night service. Abba Eban, who became the representative of Israel to the United Nations. Abba Hillel Silver, who was a leading Zionist. Rabbi Stephen Wise, who was the elderly rabbi at that time. And as a result, you would get 1,000 people trying to get into Friday night services.
You did your praying and sent your prayers to Israel, and everybody worked toward that goal.
My father was a builder of this beautiful building. I was very proud of that.
The temple was always beautiful, but it just keeps getting nicer all the time.
This synagogue conveys the meaning of Abraham's tent.
Abraham's tent was open on all sides to welcome in the outside world.
And Rabbi Kronish actually came up with the design and its architecture. Rabbi Kronish really educated people as to the outside world. He made sure that people knew that we were all affected by it, that we were all part of it.
Segregation in South Beach and Miami Beach was difficult to understand as a child. If I took a bus, the R Bayside, to go to Beach High, blacks sat in the back of the bus. There was a white drinking fountain and a black drinking fountain.
Colored people had to move out of the beach at sundown.
The premier of Chad, the country in Africa, walked in and we housed them. And at that time, people that were black could not live on Miami Beach. They had to be living in Miami. But I housed them anyhow. And he wanted to go to the Fontainebleau Hotel. And I called up some executive at the hotel, and he refused to have the man as a guest.
Lunch counters would not serve blacks. It was a very southern town, and it took some work. We were very active in the civil rights movement, and we were very active in the anti-Vietnam War movement. And through these activities, we began to become involved in marching for civil rights, protests, sit-ins, marching for peace. Rabbi Kronish pulled no bones about the fact that he thought what we were doing was right.
May we be privileged to hear the sound of the shofar when at long last it has redeemed mankind from hatred and war.
My husband, Milton Gaynor, was very involved in the temple. He was active not only in the temple, but in the community itself. My husband was associated in business with people who were active politically. This included Claude Pepper, Arthur Korshon, who was also a member of the temple. I was very fortunate to attend the inauguration of John F. Kennedy.
Unmistakable evidence has established the fact that a series of offensive missile sites is now in preparation on that imprisoned island.
During the Cuban Missile Crisis, military units were actually streaming into the Miami Beach area. Intelligence units were coming in, anti-aircraft batteries were coming in.
Rabbi Kronish spoke about the Cuban Missile Crisis at our wedding ceremony.
It's like the whole country was preparing for war.
We all had memories of being at North Beach Elementary and climbing under our desks, thinking that, you know, if the bomb hit, we would be safe because we were under our desk and that would protect us. We would be perfectly fine.
In Dade County, there has been located in this survey approximately 160 buildings with fallout protection.
In each of the wars in Israel, the temple would come together.
During the Six-Day War, the temple had a rally on stage of Rabbi Kronish, my father, and some other influential people trying to gather the community. They had to help Israel, otherwise Israel would never succeed. The community really band together. Whatever was called upon, they did.
Well, I've been pretty involved in this community. I was a commissioner in the city of Miami Beach, and then after I was the vice mayor.
We were also plaintiffs in the, what we refer to as the Bible trial. It was separation of church and state. Nobody had any objections to teaching about religion, but we had objections to forcing the children to observe religious activities. Rabbi Kronish agreed with us on the church and state case, and we succeeded in getting, well, so we thought, the Bible taken out of the schools.
Miami Beach didn't have a lot of culture.
When I first was here, there were very little concerts, art galleries, theater, ballet. It was just beginning. Everything was just beginning.
I remember when Judy Drucker first started the Great Artist Series.
Rabbi Leon Kronish, he got the brilliant idea that I should run a concert series right here at Temple Beth Sholom. He thought that it would be an extra added gift to the congregation. And the first year we brought Itzhak Perlman, Isaac Stern, Leonard Bernstein, all the great Jewish artists to this temple. That started a whole chain of events where no matter whom I would ask to come down here would be thrilled to come. I brought the American Ballet Theater with Mikhail Baryshnikov, who became a dear friend of mine. And then I brought a man called Luciano Pavarotti. And he came here to the temple to rehearse. Everybody was dumbfounded. They'd never heard anything so beautiful in their life. The concerts in the temple got so crowded, we couldn't fit everybody here. So many a time we had to rent an auditorium. And I'm very proud to say, I think Miami and Miami Beach today has some great culture.
I organized the first tours of the Art Deco district. We managed to get these trolleys that used to go on Lincoln Road in January of 1980. Andy Warhol was here. He had an exhibition at the Low Art Museum, and I took Andy Warhol through the Art Deco district. I had worked in museums, and then I had this offer to come and work at the Bass Museum. I felt that I could professionalize the museum, and so I was the director that got the museum accredited, and I brought many important exhibitions. I was there for 27 years.
I had an art gallery, and when my husband passed away, I wanted to do something special. And I was talking to an art dealer in New York, and I said something about, did anybody know where I could get one of the portraits of the Jews that Warhol had done? And they said, he had a Andy Warhol. I said, fine, can I take it? And he said, you can take it. And I said, well, what do I owe you? And he said nothing, which for this particular art dealer in New York was like an unbelievable thing. So came to Temple Beth Sholom.
On my father's side of the family, one of his sisters had a son, Arnold Newman. He was a famous portrait photographer. In 1992, after my husband passed away, I was on the board of the temple. There was discussion about bringing into the temple some interesting programs about the arts, and I thought perhaps I could invite my cousin Arnold Newman, and he gave a lecture as well as a beautiful exhibit in the temple. He presented to the temple a photograph of Ben Gurion, which is in the entry, and has a little interesting story to it. When he was in Israel and he was asked to photograph Ben Gurion, he wanted him seated with the Proclamation of Independence, and the powers to be there wanted to give him the copy. And he says, no, I only want the original. And they didn't want to give it to him, but they eventually did. He liked everything just so. It had to be legitimate.
We had the little art gallery. Now there's art all over the place.
This is a city of dreams. This is a city of activity. This is a city of charm. Look at what we are today. We are so blessed to have the Cleveland Orchestra here 3 months every winter. We have the ballet, we have the Art Center. We have so many facets of wonderful culture.
Rabbi Kronish did a lot for the community and worked very hard at Temple Beth Sholom until he had the stroke.
I never saw a man like Rabbi Glickstein who treated Rabbi Kronish, who was physically disabled at the time, with more courtesy, with more love. Rabbi Glickstein is owed a tremendous debt for the way he handled the transition and now has grown to be the leader of our temple.
The first time I met Rabbi Glickstein, it was Purim, and he was dressed as Queen Esther. I thought it was so clever and so cute and such a good sport to meet everybody at the temple in such an informal way.
In 1991, I had open heart surgery for the replacement of an aortic valve. I began to have a tachycardia, which means a rapid heartbeat. And it had been going on for several hours. And it just so happens that Rabbi Glickstein walked in. He put his hand out, shook my hand, and either that or because of some medication, I prefer to believe the former, the tachycardia stopped. So I credit the dear Lord via Rabbi Glickstein with stopping the rapid heartbeat.
I think Rabbi Glickstein is a very down-to-earth human being. Rabbi Glickstein, I feel like if I had a dirty joke, I could tell it to him.
Rabbi Glickstein, I remember one time we went on a trip together when I first became president, and we went to a convention with rabbis and I told him a off-color joke, which was pretty off-color. Well, within 2 days, every rabbi in the place knew the story. It went from rabbi to rabbi.
And then, of course, Cantor Haas came in with his beautiful, magnificent voice and just added so much more to our temple.
We have more and more young people in this community, more and more young families, and the temple is attracting more and more young families.
When I come in, I see a lot of young faces and children.
It's a new generation now.
Lador Vador means from generation to generation.
I believe that the experience of the synagogue has passed on to my children and my grandchildren's generation.
5 generations of my family are products of Temple Beth Sholom.
We have carried this 4 generations through this synagogue.
My grandchildren will be the 5th generation going here.
My son Philip was bar mitzvahed at the temple. My daughter Cheryl was bat mitzvahed at the temple. And my daughter Karen had a confirmation from the temple.
I think if we want to keep Judaism alive and vibrant, we have to instill a feeling that we have to our children and our grandchildren.
Because this is our future.
Rabbi Kronish and my family were in Israel together. And hopefully someday Rabbi Glickstein will go with my grandchildren.
Lador Vador is very much a part of my being. The greatest legacy my husband and I will leave behind is the representation of what we feel must be done to your community. We adopted the University of Miami as one of our philanthropies to make the medical school bigger and better, and this is our legacy.
Just by living, you gain so much experience and knowledge and maybe a little wisdom along the way. And I would love to pass that to the younger generation to let them know there is hope in the world.
We have been happily, ecstatically, blissfully married for 51 years. Always appreciate every little thing that your mate does for you and verbalize it and show it.
Just have respect and love for one another. I think when I was very, very young, I said, I'm going to marry this guy. Maybe when I was 14.
Mutually have infinite patience and tolerance.
We have been married for 57 years.
I think you have to prioritize your battles.
You can't win all the battles. You try to win some of the battles.
We're going to be married in a couple of weeks for 52 years. And someone often asks me, would you give any advice to get married, stay married that long? And I say, you have to have a short memory. Can't remember the fighting and all, short memory. And as you get older, that's very good. The good Lord has given us a short memory as we get older so we can stay together longer.
For a great marriage, don't wear your hearing aids around the house.
Pretend you don't hear, you don't see, and keep your mouth shut, and it will work. And it has.
The key to success for a long marriage is do whatever the wife wants.
When your spouse says something you don't like, don't try to top it. The best 2 words is, yes, dear.
You can't be together all the time. A little separation is healthy, right? And then you have a grand reunion when you...
Oh, what a reunion.
when you come back together.
In our generation, you stuck it out through thick and thin. You made things work. Today's society, if you look cockeyed to one another, you automatically get a divorce. You have to give and take.
Barry and I have been married almost 51 years. I believe a very important part of a happy marriage is putting that other person first.
I ran in 1972 for the Florida House of Representatives and I got elected. There were a lot of divorces that came about with the political people who went to Tallahassee and left their families at home. But Judy would not do that. Judy came to Tallahassee with me for the whole session.
We believe in being honorable and caring.
You have to help other people. You can't be selfish and say, well, I'm number one, and the heck with what happens with anyone else.
It's better to give than to receive. And so, give whenever you can.
If you've gotten something out of the community, you've got to give something back.
You should do the right thing to others.
To have a friend, you must be a friend.
Live and let live.
Don't be so critical. Let things flow, let things go. You have a lot to learn as you're growing up. And you don't have to know everything at the same time and try to be brilliant altogether. You can get a lot of wisdom from a lot of people and a lot of sources that you never thought that you were going to.
Keep the faith and believe in what you want to do.
Seeing life with a little humor and that glass that's half full, if you can live by those things and see the good in people first, and remember that.
You have your ups and downs, but you've got to accept the good. And I follow that. Where we live, they'll complain about this and that, and I always look, accept the good. And I say that to my children.
I think they should try to be their own person and not emulate everybody who's walking around and everything that is going on around them.
And to try not to make the same mistakes that maybe we have made in the past.
Do your homework, meaning do what you have to do to prepare yourself for whatever it is you think you will enjoy and do well at. The financial remuneration will come, and I don't think one should think first in that direction.
A balance of family and your profession or business, to me, is the most important thing in the world.
I was sitting at a bar having a drink, and this older gentleman started talking to me, and he said, we were talking about income, and he said, you know, there's one thing that you should do and you'll never get into trouble. He says, always live below your means. He says that this is where you're living, and this is your means. If your means come down, you can still continue your lifestyle. But if you're living right up there and the means come down, you're sunk. And I try to tell the kids the same thing. And that's the way I lived.
Whatever dream you have, stick to it. Be determined to make it come true. Be kind and generous and loving, and always remember that there are people who need you. So you got to be around for as long as you can.
Will there be Jews here at the end of time? I have no doubt. This is what Beth Sholom is all about. The rediscovery of our roots, our raison d'etre, our reason for being. We have searched out and we continue to search out every creative, progressive way of preserving a timeless tradition and making it timely. We have developed and we continue to develop a vast variety of activities to provide more opportunities for personal fulfillment, culturally, socially, spiritually, Jewishly.
Forward, forward to the future, building our religious school, building this testament of hope and of faith, we shall build our best shalom. From every member of our temple, we shall find the strength to build this house of learning for tomorrow, where God's word will be instilled. All the teaching of our sages, all that's holy must survive. All the spirit of the ages, we shall try to keep alive. Forward, forward to the future, building our religious school, building this testament of hope and of faith, we shall build our best shalom.
tohu manayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine matov shevet achim gam yachad. Hine tovu manayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine tovu manayim shevet achim gam yachad. Hine matov, hine matov, la 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 la. Hine matov, hine matov, la 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. La 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 la. Hine matov manayim shevet achim gam yachad.
I want to wake up in the morning where the orange blossoms grow, where the sun comes peeping into where I'm sleeping, and the songbirds say hello. I love the fresh air and the sunshine, it's good for us, you know. So I'll make my home in Miami Beach and belong to Beth Sholom.